Welcome back. And joining me now is Republican Governor Doug Burgum of North Dakota. Governor Burgum, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Kristen, great to be with you. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for being here on the Sunday before Election Day. Great to have your perspective. Let's start off by talking about women voters and something that Nikki Haley said in particular. She's, of course, Trump's former primary rival, former UN ambassador. She said she does not believe the former president's closing message is resonating with women voters. Listen to what she had to say.
This is not a time for them to get overly masculine with this bromance thing that they've got going. 53% of the electorate are women. Women will vote. They care about how they're being talked to, and they care about the issues. They need to remember that.
Governor, do you think that Mr. Trump's closing message is resonating with persuadable women voters?
Well, I think that President Trump's closing message go beyond gender, they go beyond identity, they go beyond race, they go beyond all these things, because what he talks about every day is the things that affect all Americans, whether you're a Democrat, an independent, or Republican. Because again, when I'm on the ground, like I'm here in Pennsylvania today, people are saying, hey, inflation is killing me. The borders are a concern. Safety in our cities. Worried about the economy and the jobs with this horrible jobs report we had on Friday. So I think that the issues that he's talking about are resonating with voters, and I think that's why when you see in the polls that we've got a race that's very close, but President Trump is outperforming in all these polls where he was in 16 and 20. So I'm very confident that the message that he's delivering that lifts up everyone is going to be the winning message on Tuesday.
Well, speaking of polls, of course, we have our poll, which shows the race is all tied up. And then we have this new poll out of Iowa, which shows that Vice President Kamala Harris is leading former President Trump in Iowa, 47 to 44%. He had the lead by 4 points just about a month ago. So do you think that he is failing to win over, that he's effectively losing women voters? Does he have a problem with women voters, Governor?
Well, I think there's an Emerson poll that came out in Iowa that's got President Trump up plus 10. I guess we'll find out on Tuesday where that is. But I was in Iowa the night that President Trump won 98 out of 99 counties. When there was a lot of choices for other Republican candidates for him to vote for that night. I think his strength there is across the entire state. And we know that polls vary a lot based on who you're sampling. Age, rural, urban, all of these things can matter. But I think, again, if you take the average of those last two polls, I think Trump's still going to confidently win Iowa. I'd be surprised, completely shocked if that comes anywhere close to being the fact in Iowa. I think your poll showing it being tied nationally is more accurate, because I think that's the feeling that I get on the ground is a very tight race. It's going to be decided on Tuesday, but the momentum in the last week that I've felt on the ground, including yesterday being at that Penn State football game, is that the energy from all demographics is very, very positive. And in Pennsylvania, Trump's going to win because of the energy issues. Pennsylvania, he's going to win Michigan because of the auto workers. And so I think in some of these swing states, it's in Trump's favor.
Governor, let me ask you about a big story this week. The campaign continuing to deal with the fallout from the offensive comments about Puerto Rico made by a supporter of former President Trump, by that comedian at that rally last weekend. The Puerto Rican community in Pennsylvania factors almost 500,000 people in that critical state, some saying they were absolutely furious about the comments, hurt that former President Trump hasn't apologized. Do you think that this incident could cost former President Trump the state of Pennsylvania, which is critical to winning?
Well, I was there last Sunday at Madison Square Garden when this insult comic at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, hours before President Trump even arrived at Madison Square Garden, made the comment, and the crowd was groaning. I mean, there was not approval from a very supportive Trump audience. So this is not how Trump supporters feel. It's not how President Trump feels. And then, of course, as you reported earlier today, you know, what a comic that no one's ever heard of says something versus the President of the United States calling half the voters in the country garbage, President Biden. I mean, I think this shows two things. One, it's the disrespect of this administration for Americans and their concerns, whether it's the border, whether it's inflation, but it also reflects what we've seen is that that Vice President Harris was part of this cover-up of Joe Biden's capacity.
Well, speaking of that, Governor, former President Trump had this to say back in September on that point about garbage. Listen.
It's not her. It's the people that surround her. They're scum. They're scum. And they want to take down our country. They are absolute garbage.
So, Governor, is it hypocritical to fixate on President Biden's comments, considering Donald Trump used the word garbage to describe Kamala Harris's supporters?
Well, I think what we're seeing here again this week, and whether the parsing of comments from the last 7 days is not what's going to determine the election. I mean, you know, I would be thrilled to be on this show talking about the fact that North Korea is sending you know, troops to Ukraine, that you know, Israel's getting ready to confront Iran over their nuclear weapon. But this is American politics, and this is the season of the last week before election. There's always a lot of name calling in the last week. This has all happened before, but I think in the end of the day, the voters are going to make a decision about where, you know, their own condition, and people telling them what they should be enraged about because he or she said this thing is not the same as a person's lived experience. If their lived experience is they're having trouble making their paycheck pay for their food, their gas, their clothing, their rent, or their mortgage payment, that outweighs in the end. The economy is what's going to drive voters on Tuesday, not what somebody may or may not have said. Most Americans don't have time to listen to all of the soap opera of which comments people should be concerned about.
All right. Well, Governor Burgum, as you know, enjoy talking foreign policy with you always, so we'll have you back to talk about that. But thank you for being here just days before the election to talk politics. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.